So lately I've been talking a lot about the Spanish colonization and settlement in New Mexico. But how did the Spanish find New Mexico in the first place? Let me tell you. So in 1492, the Spanish found the Caribbean islands and started conquering and settling them. In 1519, Hernán Cortés landed in Mexico, and in 1521, he defeated the Aztecs. So they gained control of Mexico. I want to make a side note here because it's very important. In 1513, Ponce de León found Florida. Just remember that. So by the year 1527, New Spain consisted of the Caribbean islands, all of Mexico, and most of South America. And of course they had plans of expanding their kingdom. And this brings us to the Narvaez expedition. So in 1527, Spain was gonna build some settlements along the coast of Florida and 2 settlements in Mexico near present-day Tampico. And to build these settlements, he sent an expedition under the command of Narvaez. I'm sorry, I forget his full name right now, and I don't feel like looking it up. All this is off the top. So Narvaez left Hispaniola in 1527 and landed in Cuba. Now this was an expedition made up of 600 people. So they got to Cuba, and then they left Cuba in 1528, headed for the coast of Florida. While they were hit with a hurricane in the middle of the ocean, and they were shipwrecked. The survivors of the disaster landed in Florida, kind of by like where present-day Tampa Bay is now, and they had lost almost 200 people in the hurricane. So the Spanish decided to split their forces. They're gonna send 300 of them along the land and 110 along the coast, and they're gonna meet up in a certain spot. Well, they never met up in that certain spot. There was only 80 survivors who made landfall, and as soon as they made landfall, they were attacked and captured by indigenous forces. Some died from harsh conditions, some died from diseases, some died from starvation. They died in different ways. But 8 years later, out of those 80 people, only 4 survived. And the names of these 4 men, though it's probably not the right pronunciation, were the most famous: Álvar Núñez de Cabeza de Vaca, Alonso del Castillo Maldonado, Andrés Dorantes de Carranza, and Estevanico, who was a black Moorish slave. So in the 8 years, when the 80 Spanish were captured, until there was only 4 survivors, they went through a lot. A lot of them were captured by natives, and the 4 that were left were slaves as well. They were slaves so long with the natives that they learned their language, they learned their customs, and they learned their ways. Imagine those 8 years though. They had to go from what is now Florida to Mexico City. So that means they had to go through all the swampy lands of Atlanta, Georgia, through all that area, Louisiana. They had to cross through all of Texas, a desert, and then New Mexico, Arizona, like all that area, just the hot desert. Everything they went through, 8 years, had to have been a lot of struggle. So I had read some stories that the 4 men had finally met up and they all escaped together. But now I heard another story that the 4 men ran into slave catchers in Sinaloa in the year 1536, and these men took them back to Mexico City. But the other story is that they had to struggle all the way down to Mexico City. Either way, there was only 4 survivors that made it to Mexico City. Now these 4 survivors started telling all kinds of tales of their survival, of their struggle, of what they went through. They were telling stories about 7 cities of gold to the norte, Cibola. Now this story goes back to indigenous and Spanish roots, so it kind of seemed true. The Spanish had a story back in the day when the Moorish attacked Spain that 7 priests fled with all the gold west. They fled west with all kinds of gold and settled and built 7 cities of gold somewhere to the west. Those were the fabled cities of gold, Cibola. The natives also had a similar version to this story. I'm just not sure what it was. So that made the Spanish believe it even more. So when these 4 survivors started spinning all these tales of the 7 cities of gold, and Estevanico was the one mostly saying it, he even wrote a book about it, the Spanish believed it. So Francisco de Coronado, the governor of the New Galicia province of New Spain, which was in northwest Mexico, got with this friar named de Niza. I forget his first name, but his last name was Niza, N-I-Z-A. They came up with an idea of getting an expedition whatever you want to call it, and going north to explore and find these cities of gold, so that way they could claim them for Spain. They had to pay for most of this out of their own funds as well. While they did put this expedition together and they left from Compostela in 1540, they left with 400 European men at arms, anywhere between 1,500 and 2,000 Mexican indigenous allies, 4 friars and several slaves. And then they went north, and that's how they found New Mexico in 1540. Now I will tell the story of Coronado's expedition in a future video, as well as what happened after that when Oñate settled. So stay tuned and watch my future videos. Thank you for watching. This has been the story of how New Mexico was found by the Spanish. This is Tragedy. I'm out.